The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, How the Private Sector Can Avoid Surprise Capital Project Costs. I'll be your host today. My name is Evan Hill here. I'm on the product marketing team. And if you're any familiar with our content, you've probably seen my face before, whether it's on the Connected Construction podcast or one of our previous webinars. Super grateful you took the time to attend today. I think we've got a lot of value that you can get out of today's session. We've got two rock star guests that I'm really excited to introduce. Super lucky that we got them on today's webinar. They are both very popular gentlemen, so I think you're going to learn a lot from them today. But before we dive into our guests and learn a little bit more about them and eventually jump into discussion, I just want to go through a couple of quick housekeeping items. So on the right side of your screen, you should have like a little GoToWebinar type interface. At the bottom, you should see a chat and questions tab. Okay, so at the end of this webinar, we're going to leave about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for an open Q&A session. We like to do this pretty much with every single webinar we do. The questions have not been shown to our webinar hosts or our webinar guests, so feel free to show us, throw us curveballs as they come up throughout the discussion. We're going to leave an appropriate amount of time at the end. It is first come, first serve, so get your questions in real time as they come up. Second of all, if you need a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, you will get that in your email. And third item, 3 of 3, I believe there might be one more. If you need to leave today's webinar suddenly through, no problem whatsoever, that's fine. This webinar will be available on demand on the eBuilder website after its conclusion. With that said, we've got some really interesting guests that I want to introduce you to. We've got Chris Shada, who is the Enterprise Managing Consultant and CEO of Real Foundations, which is a partner of eBuilders. And then we have Rishi Manavi, who is the Associate Director of Gilead Sciences. The way this is going to work from a format perspective today, we're going to have Chris initially talk all about anticipated cost theory and really share his wealth of best practices in terms of how projects and capital programs can maintain strong financial health while avoiding those sort of surprise cost overruns. So a sensitive topic for all owners and contractors. And then Rishi is going to follow up Chris's presentation, giving some more real life, world life examples that he is using eBuilder to apply these concepts to. So with that said, before we dive into the presentations, Chris, I'll let you go first. Why don't you open us up and tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, and the relationship you have to eBuilder?
Well, first of all, I have to apologize to everybody. I missed the white shirt memo, so I got the wrong color shirt on. So I feel a little bit like the kid at school here. But I'm talking to you from a little shack in Bozeman, Montana, where quite unexpectedly I've been holed up for the past 14 months. But for the 30 plus years before that, I traveled several 100,000 miles a year. And as regards this subject matter, I've been fortunate enough for a long time to be involved in very, very large capital projects. It's a little embarrassing, but there's a thing about Phil Mickelson playing in 10 different decades in a major. It's kind of like I've been involved in a massive global project in 4 decades, which is slightly embarrassing. But Canary Wharf in the 90s, at the time, the largest commercial development project in the world. Euro Disney shortly after that. The Kuala Lumpur Towers, the 2 largest buildings in the world at the time. And then in more recent decades, the Columbus Center project that related, now called Time Warner Center. And then most recently, the Hudson Yards project, the massive $20+ billion project on the west side of Manhattan. So have a lot of eyes on the ground seeing how really big projects work, and projects where the goal is for capital to get the building it wants to get. And I think we were part of pioneering this whole anticipated cost philosophy and have lived with it through a number of decades. So that's the perspective that I'm bringing. I've got the harder job. I have to talk about theory. Rishi gets to talk about all the stuff you guys care about, which is how this stuff is really working in the world today. So Rishi?
Yeah. Oh, Chris, thank you. Thank you, eBuilder, and I really welcome all the webinar participants. And I'm looking forward to be presenting or sharing the podium with Chris. So I'm Rishi Manavi. I work for Gilead Sciences in their capital planning and program controls function. We at Gilead are not in the business of building buildings, but we are, in the business of, creating medicines, creating possible medicines for our therapeutic areas and unmet medical needs. So definitely our role in corporate engineering and facilities is to support our businesses and make them available the assets, the facility infrastructure in the most optimum fashion. As you know, capital pressures are all organizations are facing capital pressures as well as operational expense pressures, and it adds more onus on our teams to be able to adapt quickly to these recent changing times and help leadership through data-driven analysis, data-driven reports on how we can reprioritize or prioritize our capital portfolio. And that's really my function within Gilead, and it follows with the stellar project execution teams that we have who are actually building those projects on the ground. So that's Rishi.
Thank you, Rishi. Thank you both for giving us a little bit of an introduction on you both. Like I said previously, we're going to start with Chris, who's going to give us a little bit of an educational tutorial on anticipated cost theory. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and we are going to have our admin transfer over control to Chris so he can open up into his session. Rishi and I will go off camera, and then Rishi will be back in about 15 to 20 minutes once Chris is done. And like I said, at the end, we'll save about 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A. So with that said, Chris, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Well, these guys made me produce slides. I think it was, they might have rightfully been worried about you having to see me full screen for 10 minutes. So I produced 3 slides. There's one of them. We're a professional services firm. And I've got to do a little 1-minute commercial. We focus on the whole built and building environment space, real estate. We work across the spectrum from investors, developers, owner-operators, and occupiers. We sort of see the physical building as our client, and then whoever develops it, gets it built, fills it up, empties it out, buys it, sells it, our human enterprise clients. We deliver consultative services. How do you run your business better? How do you run your projects better? And we also do offer managed services in real estate. So doing generally some boring bits of necessary work that an enterprise doesn't consider strategic, but knows they need to do. Bookkeeping, data movement, application support, that kind of stuff on an ongoing basis to clients. So we've got a pretty good view globally of the role of real estate. I'm sure most people in this webinar already know this, but it's worth reminding ourselves that real estate's the largest asset class in the world. The value of investable real estate is greater than the value of all of the companies in the world. And it makes sense because we all need to live, work, and shop someplace. So we spend a lot of our time every day in a piece of real estate. So that's who we are. And I mentioned a little bit about my own experience with large projects over a long period of time. We do a lot of work today with investors and developers, not so much on the trade contractor side. And I'm assuming that we've got a large number of people in this webinar today that are on the owner developer side as opposed to contractor side as well. So the keys to not getting surprised. There's a anticipated cost philosophy that has been developed over the past 50 or 60 years. I think it's in place without even being talked too much about in a lot of very large construction and development organizations today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, as Evan said, the theory. I get saddled with that, and Rishi will talk to you in a few minutes about the practical real world parts of this. And I've only got one slide, so this is it. You can read ahead and then ignore me for a few minutes if you want. But we have found that there's a kind of mindset shift often that we need to start with if somebody's new to this, and that is reminding ourselves of some basic principles in the context. And the one that's always struck me over 40 years is that all this work is done on paper, planning, designing, the pro forma for the entire development effort, and the budget for a particular building, the estimating, quantity takeoff, and all this stuff is done on paper. But then the building gets built over time. And so you can do a pro forma in a day or a week, but it takes 9 months, 12 months, 18 months to build a building. And there's all sorts of things. There's weather, there's economic changes, there are environmental changes, the cost of material changes. The building gets built over time. And so however good one's plan is, a plan is not a building. The budget is not a building. Paper is not steel. And the many job cost systems were frankly designed by accountants, and they tend to be based in the notion of to get control over the big thing, I need to control all the little things. And that is very well intentioned, but often it means you don't even get a lot of the little things into the system until it's too late. So this whole notion about knowing what you're really going to spend and not being surprised starts with this notion of a building is built in time. And there's a before. We sometimes joke about BC and AD. It's, BC is before construction and AD is after development. But there's this moment when you really start building a building where there's a whole new set of rules that apply. And you do all of this work to plan, all this work to do a budget, all the work to do the quantity takeoffs and the estimate, and that's all very essential work. But it is on paper. And then somebody finally pulls the trigger, rings the bell, and the game starts. And we have a whole new set of rules. And as my favorite anticipated cost philosopher, Mike Tyson, once famously said, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And so the anticipated cost philosophy is really all about having a plan for getting punched in the face, but recognize that all of the work before start was important, was essential, but you need to keep doing similar work once you do start construction. And there's a notion that we sometimes talk about, which is zero-based building. So many of you are probably familiar with the concept of zero-based budgeting in the corporate annual budgeting world, that, you know, this sort of reasonable thing happened over the years. I take last year's budget and I add 5% to it. And then I take last year's budget and I subtract 2%, and last year's budget and add 10%. And pretty soon I'm years away from the original budget, and no one knows what the original, you know, budget was for. So the anticipated cost philosophy starts with this notion that once you really start construction, you need to really start thinking anew. And you need to deal with the world as it is, not as you projected it to be 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years ago when the pro forma was done and the budget was done. And the basic principles here are asking yourself every day, based on everything we know right now, again, not what we knew when we did the budget, or not when we knew we did the pro forma, but based on what we know right now, what's it going to cost to complete the work? And so that's question number one every day. Based on what we know today, not yesterday, not a month ago, not 6 months ago, what's it going to cost to get the work done? At whatever level of control you're asking that question of. For a trade, for a trade package, for a phase of a building, of a complex of buildings, that the fundamental question, anticipated cost, is what's it going to cost to finish? And the second fundamental question is, the second fundamental principle is ask the people who actually know. And who are the people who actually know? The people who are working in the field, right? And not the guy who did the pro forma, not the guy who did the budget, not the guy who did the estimate. They're probably not around. If they're around, they're far away in some office someplace. The people who know what it's really going to cost to get something done are the people who are in the field managing the work. And then the final principle is give them a place to give you the answer. And this is where a lot of job cost systems fall down. That they're built, frankly, again, by accountants who say, well, you can't mess up my system with stuff until it's all buttoned down and it's all approved. Don't put anything in my system until it's all controlled. And the inadvertent consequence of that is all of that information, there's all that intelligence that is not in the system. So somebody in the field knows that there was a windstorm and it wrecked a bunch of stuff that's going to cost money. Somebody in the building knows that one contractor backed his truck into something and he hopes he's going to get a back charge. He's not sure that contractor is going to be around long enough to pay it off. And they know that stuff long before there's a formal estimate for a change, long before there's a negotiation of a change, and long before the accountants will let that thing in the system. So those are the three basic questions. When we were on Canary Wharf, this was a long time ago. So we had like big computers. We had like a computer cart, and the guy running a big chunk of that project would do a walk around stand-up meeting. And that's where we identified all the anticipated cost items. So we had a computer, we had like a 250-foot extension cord. We'd run around in the building under construction trying to find a place to plug it in. And that was his basic question. And it became sort of a joke because he would just ask whoever it was, a project manager in charge of a trade package, that part of the building, the whole building. All right, what's it going to cost to finish this trade? What's it going to cost to finish this trade? And often you'd have a younger project manager, a little bit nervous. This guy was 6'6" too. So not only was he quite experienced, he was also rather physically imposing. And they would say, well, in the budget, and he would say, forget the budget. What I ask you is what it's going to cost to finish. I know about the budget. I know about the commitments. I know about the change orders. I know about the checks we had to write because you were too lazy to get the change order written in time. That's all old news. Now tell me what else we have to spend money on to finish. And that's a pretty powerful idea, I believe. And it's powerful to say whatever we know today, we should take advantage of, because that matters to capital. It matters to capital to know what's available to make other changes that might bring greater value to that building. So on Canary Wharf, 13 buildings, I believe, every morning at 7 o'clock, there was an anticipated cost report for every single building. And the reward there was you told people as soon as you knew. And the penalty, and this is going to sound strange to cost accountants, was for not putting something in the system that wasn't complete. So we wanted to know as soon as somebody knew about something, and you made it really easy to put an anticipated cost item in. If you had no idea what it was going to cost, you put a pence in, which indicated I have no idea what it's going to cost. And then that would move over a period of days or weeks from getting estimated to getting negotiated to being a pending change to finally being pushed onto the approved committee column. And you got penalized if something appeared one day as an approved change order. It's like, well, wait a minute, you knew about this a week ago, a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Why didn't you put it in the system? And so we had people all over that project, and this was in the green screen days, right? Putting things in as soon as they knew it. At the end of the day, what did I find out about today that might cost us money that's not already captured in a commitment? So that's it. The building that's built over time, paper isn't steel. The goals of the anticipated cost are to deliver the right building to capital, right? We sometimes joke that on time under budget's the wrong goal. Not really, but it's not quite the right goal. And the right goal is delivering the right building for the right price just in time. Last little story, I actually did a project quite a long time ago for a famous company where the problem statement was we're always under budget. Think about that. So the individuals delivering those projects, that's, hey, we're under budget, we're heroes, we're under budget. From the enterprise perspective, it meant that we had allocated capital, and now that capital was lying fallow. We could have used it for something better on that project, on that building, or on some other building. And so this trap of, it's certainly really bad to be over budget. Therefore, let's make the goal under budget rather than getting it right, rather than knowing as soon as we know what the real conditions in the field are, what that building, 30 stories, 50 stories, 70 stories in the air is telling us about what it will cost to get it right. So it's really pretty simple. Once you see it, it's very hard to unsee that the basic principles are every day is a new day. You sort of do a new budget from this morning based on data you have this morning, and the anticipated costing is where you do that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rishi, and he can tell you about how they're bringing this stuff to life yesterday, today, tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chris. Rishi, you can come on the camera and share your screen.
Hello, can you guys see my screen?
We see your desktop.
Oops. How about now?
Still desktop.
Oh boy, can I stop? Okay, there you go. Can you guys now see me?
Yep.
Stop sharing my screen because I want to start my slides a bit later.
No worries.
So great. I mean, Chris, that was awesome. The whole anticipated cost philosophy that you just explained is very critical and crucial. I mean, all of the points that you mentioned are so valid when you are executing a program or executing a project. And at Gilead, we have learned through years and years of executing capital projects for our businesses that no project is similar. Although you might be building it at the same campus, you'll be building at a different location. You might be building a different type of buildings. It is different each time, and you may have built lab a couple of years ago, and now you're embarking on another lab project, and the challenges that come through are all unique. So I feel cost management in that context is not really any mathematical skill. It's an art. It really boils down to how you are anticipating and estimating your cost for the entire project, right from inception to when you have your occupants occupy the building. And in Chris's case, right, he has dealt with a lot of external clients. And in my career I started as a consultant with Parsons Corporation, where we had external clients and we were delivering projects, doing construction management, design management for them. And I've had my boots dirty on a bunch of projects where we saw how everyday changes affect the cost. And this goes back to the philosophy that Chris mentioned, is what is it you have to ask every day, what is it going to cost you to complete this project, which is very important because a lot of owners, a lot of clients get hung up in what my budget was, and they totally miss out on where we are going and how we can reach to what that cost is. And I think you need, not just the right discipline of project controls or project management, but it's also a lot of input from the experts. So you definitely have to ask the right people. It is important that you collect and gather the information from people that actually know it. And the function of cost control is really to bring that information, monetize that information, to ultimately see where we're going to land. So that's very crucial. And we are in practice doing a lot of those principles that Chris has mentioned in our early planning. Over the time, we have learned that owners should really focus on putting a lot of effort in their planning. Leave no stones unturned, ask the right questions upfront, get your priorities right, and really embark on a purpose-driven project or purpose-driven capital idea, which we call when the project is not yet decided, we have a go or no go. And that's where one of the functions in capital planning is collecting all those capital ideas across the organization, where we have to do investments in our facilities, maybe facilities conditions assessment, or embark on a new research building or a new manufacturing building. And what we are trying to do is we are really putting the effort upfront in planning and really managing it at a portfolio level. And one good thing that we recently have embarked on, and this is based on a direction of our new leader, our CEO, who laid out Gilead's strategic priorities. And what we are doing in corporate engineering and facilities, which is my organization at Gilead, is we are tying each and every project that we plan to do and will be doing to our strategic priorities. So before even embarking on a project, and I'm touching on the soft sides of project before it starts, ground running, is we really want to understand the why we're doing that project, and if there's any other alternative to not doing that project or doing that project differently. And that is broadly my day-to-day function when we go through our budgeting cycles and capital planning cycles, is really identifying everything that's out there that needs to be done and plan it and allocate or request capital accordingly. And Chris mentioned a great point, right? There's on time and under budget in my books is also not the best or not the most optimum, because now you're over allocating capital, which in our case could be used for science, or can be used to do experiments on new molecules. And in capital planning, and we are trying to embed that culture where we are really focused on how much really focused on accurate forecasting of our capital year over year, because it also affects our OpEx budgets. And I know a lot of audience are owner entities who face these issues. You know, if your forecasts are off, your management is going to ask you, like, why did you request so much capital? And we, as an organization within corporate engineering and facilities, is trying to optimize our capital to really come within the minimum variance of our anticipated forecast. I know if we exactly match our forecast, we are cooking our books, or cooking numbers, but there has to be a reasonable variance where we land each year. And with that, I would say we were managing projects before, you know, all across. We have a decent size capital portfolio. We have multiple project execution teams and also our facilities team, who embark on smaller, mid-sized to large projects within Foster City and a few global locations. And we always were using the legacy systems. And although we don't want to compare of how our competitors or how other companies are doing, we really wanted to look at how we do things and what can we do better from what we did yesterday. So that really sparked the idea amongst our teams to really start looking at systems, start looking at centralized repositories of where we can manage our capital portfolio, manage our costs better, help our teams develop cash flows accurately. And everything was done in Excel. I mean, Excel is a great tool. It gives you a great amount of flexibility, but when you're looking at a portfolio level, imagine we have thousands of Excels, with all these projects, managing their own cash flows, managing their own costs. And it became very tedious, I would say, for all the team members to really manage all those in Excel. And in capital planning as well, I was having a lot of challenges in looking at these cash flows in different files. So what we really did was we explored, some of the systems that are there, just to mature ourselves in how we manage our data. And at Gilead, we have had a really good culture of driving data-driven decisions. The leadership within our organization is very, for data-driven analysis, and we are always asked a lot of information before we make a decision or recommend a decision as to why we are doing certain things. So for that, we really needed a system. And let me share my screen now, just so I give you a context. Can you guys see my screen?
Not yet, no.
How about now?
Yep, we see functions in corporate engineering and facilities.
Yeah, so this is really, I'm sure there are a lot of organizations out there who are doing all these functions, right? They're doing capital planning, they're doing project initiation approvals, they're doing cost management, portfolio management, bid management, reporting, document management. And we were in the same boat, that we were using tools, legacy tools like Excel, shared drives, PowerPoint, and whatever was easy for us to use. And we still delivered projects successfully, some not very successfully, but it was a bag of success stories and not so success stories. And very recently, we embarked on finding the right system for us. And we really got together as a team and asked the question, like, what do we really want, and why do we want it? And we started with some of the challenges we had. Like, we had no automated process flows. We were doing project reviews and approvals through paper, going through multiple signatures and writing our justifications, writing our business case. It was all done manually, and it was adding a lot of time in our processes. So we didn't have any automated processes. We didn't have one source of truth. Everybody had their versions of budget data or updated budget or cost reports that we used to like track and go back and compile data in multiple versions of it. Really created a lot of inaccuracies. As you can see, we were using basic tools, and there was a lot of inconsistency in the data, and sometimes it was frustrating for us, like where are the files? Multiple users have them either on the desktop, or some have placed them in the shared drive, and it was a real challenge. And then ultimately, we lacked a structured communication platform. Although all our major projects, had their own communication, communications to our steering committees and our leadership, but there were many other, smaller or mid-sized projects that didn't necessarily have a structured platform for reporting progress, or even get approved or manage their budget changes. So, like I said, we got together as a team and really wanted to understand why we need a system. And before I go to that slide, I want to focus on this one aspect, right? A lot of owners want to implement a system from a reporting perspective. How can they create cool reports? How can they make things look really better and really sharp and really attractive for management to see? But they miss out on the aspect of are those systems easy to manage? So your system owners are really not just the leaders, it's also the peers, the project managers, the project controls people, the engineering people who are in the system trying to access the data, trying to get these approvals done. How is this system or any system easy for them to operate? So we went down to that level that this should be easier for our project managers to operate day in, day out. Even if, reporting, we can have reporting as much as we want. We can create custom reports as much as we want. But we needed something where we are able to manage our data. We manage our data accurately, and that's why we really had a discussion like, hey, let's not focus solely on the reporting aspect. Let's see, is there any system out there that can help us manage our data better in the easiest fashion with least amount of clicks to get around? So that was our philosophy, and we talked to a lot of system owners. There's a lot of great products out there, and I felt we did our thorough analysis, and this is where, when we go data driven, right? We talked to 5 or 6 companies, along in the past year before we even made a decision on implementation. And as you can see, the core competencies that were listed before, kind of ranked them, and this gives you a good perspective, right, of what do you really need, and these capabilities can change for different owners. So it really begins with what is it that you really want, and how much control do you want on your projects, and how much control do you really want on your costs or your processes. And you really need to, when you think about processes, you really have to embed, the principles of empowerment, the principles of easy, the principles of, the principles that will not lead you to a very bureaucratic approval process. So we had all of those in our mind, and we looked at it in 2 sections: the core requirements and the ease of use and affordability. And through this, we kind of felt that eBuilder was a very good solution for us, primarily for us, it gave us the capability of capital planning and project execution in one single portfolio. The reason I'm very excited about the capital planning aspect of it is, once your capital plan is input in the system, right? And I'm a very systems person. I like to play with tools. I can really see immediate impacts of pushing and pulling my projects ahead. And that was one thing that resonated with me, although it had a lot of good features on cost management, bid management, as well as schedule management that our project execution teams will be using extensively. My personal interest was to be able to adapt, able to let my management know if we push these 5 projects ahead, this is going to be our capital impact. And I was not able to do that very quickly in the systems that I was using. So this will be bringing a lot of value in how I communicate my information to my leadership. One other thing that really was a differentiator for us was able to generate our own workflows. So we don't have to go back to eBuilder to say, hey, can you guys create these workflows for us? There's some basic workflows that we had them help and train us. And in the future, as our business needs or as our business processes change, we will be able to go in and create these workflows. And that was absolutely fantastic. And it gave us the flexibility of designing on all our workflows as things change. Because in this changing environment, right, or even change in leadership, we always are looking for better things. We implement a process, we may not like it, or it's too cumbersome. We can go back and make changes. And we are all for changes for the best and to gain efficiency. So we don't resist change, we kind of adapt to change. And I think this software really gave us that particular flexibility and customizable experience within our workflows. I mean, those were really some of the factors that really help, or tools that really help projects and programs to have a better anticipated cost theory. I mean, every month we go through our projects, what is going to be our forecast, and every 2 times in a year we are revisiting our entire forecast on capital portfolio. And I think we although we have not started using eBuilder, we are still in the late stages of implementation. But we're already seeing some of the benefits that we are getting in terms of inputting our data, running some cost reports, and looking at things and making fine-tuning and checks and balances. So definitely very excited. So that's really, was going to be my focus on communicating to everybody that you really have to start early in your planning cycles. Early in your planning, planning your projects, planning your portfolios, and really ask the whys of why you're doing certain things, and go through those rigorous discipline processes of cost management, scope management. And I would really I see cost management as or project cost as beach sand, right? The more you try to squeeze it, the more it goes away from your hand. So you have to really, as project owners, try to understand how much of it is that you really want to control. It's not that you should not control your project costs, but what has been successful, what I have seen work successfully, is don't try to reduce the project budget, but try to add value within the same budget, or maybe more, in order to get the better product than what you had planned. And that has been really one of our, one of the principles that I really advocate is don't look at cutting costs. Don't look at value engineering. My value engineering is don't value engineer to remove the value out of the project. Value engineering is really adding value by optimizing the cost. So a lot of times, in my past working with clients, I have seen people embark on value engineering exercises and eliminate a lot of valuable things that are in the building, which are later come back and haunt them that why didn't we think about this before? So it really boils down to adding value to to your projects within the existing cost structures. I think that's pretty much in a nutshell I wanted to cover today. Kind of latching on to Chris's anticipated cost philosophy. Happy to take any questions.
Rishi, thank you so much. That was super informative. Chris, you can come back on the camera, speak of the devil. I did promise a Q&A session at the end. That is what we're going to do. I've got a couple of questions from the audience that I'm going to throw each of your way. The first one is, I think, directed to you, Rishi. And you might not have an answer to this, but I think you probably do. What are some of the processes that you guys are looking to implement eBuilder around on cost management? Stuff like budgets, contracts, invoices, change orders. What's your perspective on that?
So we are pretty much implementing all the processes around change management. Cost management. It starts with commitment approvals, budget change, budget approval, the original budget approval, also the change orders, the trend analysis, the trends that go in. So we felt that cost management was one of the strong areas that we wanted to leverage all the capabilities that eBuilder offered. And we were very flexible because we really like to keep things simple. Our cost reports are not something that will make you dyslexic. They are something that are very easy to read for right from the cost engineer who's in the weeds to the VP who is looking at it. So we actually executed about 6 processes on cost management with eBuilder.
Chris, how are costs that are not final or approved accounted for in your forecasting?
Well, I think that's the heart of the matter. That's where the surprises are, right? So any job cost system out there handles the ones that are approved. Those are it's hard to get them approved and all kinds of work goes into them, but from a system perspective, that's easy. And this whole way of thinking, this mindset came about in recognizing too many times, particularly on big projects, because you built all these controls, back to theme that Rishi brought up of, let's keep this straightforward. Let's not make it so complicated that nobody comes in the house anymore, right? It's like the house is beautiful, it's really clean, but nobody ever uses it, right? And sometimes I think that happens to job cost systems, that you've got to have a place that the person who knows something can tell you about that something. And in my past experience, and you can pick this up, Evan or Rishi, about how that works exactly in eBuilder, because I think eBuilder does have the ability to do this. You have a place where somebody can just say, I found something out today, let me tell you about it. And then you can track that. And the Canary Wharf project that I referenced before, this was in green screen days. So we had a simple green screen. Anybody with the right authority, from like an assistant project manager on up, say, I found out something today, he would describe it. If he didn't know the trades, he didn't know the trades, like I mentioned before. If he didn't know what it was going to cost you, he put a pence in. And then we would move that from that WAG, you can all guess what that means, to an estimate. So it's a little flag that said, okay, now somebody in the estimating department actually looked at that. Now we've talked to the likely trade contractor, so now it's a proposed change. Now we're writing the change apparatus that moved then into the pending change, and then it finally got approved. And I think it's essential in avoiding surprises to have all of those things sit in the same system right next to the stuff that is already budgeted and committed and approved. You got to put those together. What have we committed and approved, plus all the other stuff floating around out there that's eventually going to become a commitment but hasn't yet. Put it in the same system, because we see with developers all over the place all sorts of hidden shadow systems, because everybody in the field knows they need to do this. They need to keep track of all the stuff that might bite them in the ass. So they've got their own shadow system because they're not allowed to put it in the real system. So I think the question's great. It's like, yeah, there has to be a place in the system to put those things before they're approved, or you will be surprised.
Rishi, are you there? I've got one last question. I don't see you on camera anymore, so I'm not sure if you're still there. That's going to be a no. No worries. We will follow up with the person that asked this question around comparing, owner and contractor solution-oriented tools. But with that said, hey, Chris, Shada, thank you so much, sir, for showing up today and giving us your input and educating us a little bit on anticipated cost theory. It's clear you have decades of experience, so we're grateful for your time today.
Sure. And to that last questioner, I'm sure if you contact Rishi and offer him a little bit of money, he'll put the names of those other people in the columns for you too. I didn't want to embarrass anybody, to his credit. But yeah, it's so.
Like I said earlier, super grateful for the both of you. This recording will be available on demand after the fact. So if you want to send this to a colleague or somebody else you feel like can learn from this webinar, it will be available on demand on the eBuilder website. But with that said, Chris Shada, and then Rishi Manavi, Associate Director of Gilead Sciences, and Chris, who is the CEO of Real Foundations. Super grateful for the both of your time, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.